even care. But you know, you would loft these out, and you would take the designer's drawings, you would blow them up to full scale, you would put them on the lofting floor so they're full scale. You would lay them out on frames that you would cut, and basically it's a technique that's old. Once you know how to do it, it's pretty cool. Not many people know how to do it. So I learned how to do that, and we built frogs, and we had splines and all of these things to transfer these full-scale drawings of cross-sections of the boat and make them into frames that would go in stations that would be cross-sections of the boat. And then you would set those up, and this was a 38-foot boat, and it depends on the designer. You know, I was over there, they're speaking Swedish. You know what I mean? So, and they're speaking Finnish, so it's not simple enough that they spoke Swedish. The guy's speaking Finnish. So I'm working with him, and you learn these terms according to what, you know, whatever words they use. So I'm picking up the language, you know, to do this, and we're setting this up. We set the boat up, and then once you get the frames all set up, you run battens over the frames to see how it came out. You know, how does it look? Do you need to adjust the frames at all, or is it fair? And fair is a real, you know, that's a complicated term. So we lay the battens over. Once we saw that the frames were all set up right and everything was set, then we'd strip over the top of these frames that were in stations, and we would put these wood strips over them. Usually you use like 3/4 by 3/4 wood strips and long lengths, and then you just put them over there, and then next thing you know, you have a solid structure, and it ties everything together. You've got all your frames set up with these strips of wood over them, and then you fill in any gaps, you know, so you have most of the boat done, but in some places, you know, the strips of wood leave gaps, and then you just sort of fill those in. Then we puttied over that whole thing. Then we put fiberglass over that whole thing, and then we started fairing with, and back in those days we used to use Bondo. And Bondo was just what you get, auto repair type stuff. And we'd use Bondo, and we would go ahead and fair the boat out, get it close. Then next thing you know, they get it real close, and they make it like, something that they're going to build 30 boats just like it. Any imperfection in the mold is something that's going to come out in the final product. So this was a mold that was supposed to produce, be a production mold and produce a lot of boats. So anyway, we did that. I came back after my year at New College, you know, going to New College for a year. I came back and I asked to be admitted to New College again. And I told them what I'd been doing. I'd been racing sailboats in Europe, and that we had won some world championships, and that we had done this. And I was awfully sorry that, you know, I left like I did. And I was actually told that I would never be allowed to return to New College by Nancy Ferraro. And she said, "You'll never come back to New College again." And so there I was, you know, back asking to be returned. And they let me back into New College. For what reason, I don't know. But anyway, so that I'm trying to just go over some of these things with you. I got working with Ron Holland when I got here. I was fortunate enough to meet with Ron Holland, who was designer working in Charlie Morgan's office, and he just happened to be the person that had the good ideas. And he designed a quarter tonner, and I started working with his brother-in-law, and we won. While I was working on a production version of the quarter tonner, they took the quarter tonner, we took the quarter tonner down to the original quarter tonner that they built, down to the phosphate docks. Somebody to do with the Tampa Yacht Club knew somebody who, you know, was one of the owners in this phosphate shipping company. And the next thing you know, we got a crane, and we're lifting this little boat, this little 24-foot boat, putting it on a phosphate boat, going to England. So the boat goes to England, enters the World Championships. It's in the World Championships. It had a finish of like 3rd, 5th, 4th, and 6th. It won. You know, wasn't the fastest boat. Apparently the fastest boat, which was much faster, lost its rig. So, you know, consistency, they won. They were obviously good sailors to be in the World Championship. Took the little boat, so we're working on the 24. And I'm working with another boat builder that had worked down in Miami, and the two of us are working. And we're working on this 24, and when Gary left, he explained to us how the Skeg went, you know? And so we're doing very nice work. I mean, to begin with, we're doing very nice boat building work. We're model of efficiency, we're honest, we're showing up on time, we're working late hours. And those were the days when you worked until 10, 11 o'clock at night. You got up, 10 o'clock in the morning, came to work at 11, worked 10, it was just a real project. We were trying to get this done. So we get to doing the Skeg of this boat. And the Skeg is just, if you turn a boat upside down, it's sort of some fairing that goes into the rudder, and it's just something, a detail. So we're doing this, and this guy who I respect is the other boat builder who's working on the project while Gary's over racing sailboats in England. And so he says that he's going to have this sort of narrow fairing, what you call a radius, from the hull into the Skeg. And I said, well, I didn't understand that. I thought that he wanted a broad fairing. And so he said, oh my God, we have a difference of opinion. You heard one thing, I heard one other thing. So I said, look, you do it your way. It's not going to take us that long. You do it your way, I'll do it my way. And so Gary comes back, here's this beautiful boat done. And he gets to the Skeg, and one side has a little narrow radius, the other side has the other radius. And Gary looks at us like, okay guys, I don't know what was going on, but this is a little weird. And then we explained to him that we didn't think it would take much time, but there it was. So we finished that boat. That went to the production, let's see where it is. This one right here. That was the production boat.
What do they call it?
It was called the Kiwi 24.
Oh,
And it was Ron Holland's first design. And then we basically, here you can look at this. I look skinny in this one. It's a good one. You can pass this around. I'm the front guy, the skinny one. And that was down in Miami. We were racing down in Miami. And we took that boat down, and we did real well with the boat. And basically that boat, this right here was the boat that we won the production. This was the production boat world champion. And that was the first one. That was Diablo. I sailed on that. And what we did on those boats, which was kind of neat, is that we were all racing, we were into racing, was that we would design them so when we did a shelf in the boat, the shelf in the boat wasn't for books. The shelf in the boat was meant so that you could jam your weight out. And a person could get up on that shelf and actually jam their weight out where it would be the best place for the weight to be. And we'd even go down below so we wouldn't make windage. So if we were sailing and we were seriously racing and there wasn't much difference in the boats, we had to figure something to get an advantage, anything to get an advantage. So we went down below, we'd get on the shelves, even in when the weather was light, when the air was light, we'd go sit on the keel. Because the further you are away from the keel, the more the pitching motion. The more the boat pitches, the more it goes like this instead of like that. So we would do these things, and these were tricks that we heard from other people.
Who was right with the Skeg?
I think I was.
You were.
But I'm telling Tad probably tells his story totally different, that he was right and I was an idiot. But I wouldn't say that anybody was an idiot. We just got to an impasse there, But, so anyway, basically, these are just things that when you, thanks for dusting that off. Dusty. So we worked with the same designer, Ron Holland. Ron had a run. Ron was one of the best designers in the world. He and a guy named Doug Peterson designed boats that were similar to each other. I don't know whether they knew each other or whether they copied from each other, but about the same time they both came out with medium displacement boats. So what happened in boat design is that there were heavier displacement boats, and if I were to describe to you what a heavy displacement boat looks like, it's like the difference between a wine glass and a champagne glass. The lighter boats were simply that. They were lighter. Off the wind, they were definitely faster, and they weren't dragging as much wetted area. And the people that I worked with, Sven Ritter was in keel designs. I was talking to Charlie Morgan, who was asking me about what we used to do in keel designs. Well, Sven Ritter was an aerodynamic engineer who taught at the Institute of Technology in Stockholm. And he actually designed and built the wind tunnel. So he was a pretty bright guy. And one of his claims to fame is that he designed a jet that could stop in midair. I don't know what was involved in it, but he had a thing where this was just something that nobody else had come up with. And he and his little wind tunnel that he had designed had figured out how to come up with a foil or a shape that would allow this to happen. So he came up with this, and I saw a program on TV about jet planes, and they said, well, there was this Swedish plane that was just unusual because it could do something that nobody else could do. Of course, now they have the Harrier, which is a British plane that can actually just take off from sitting location. So they've got other planes that can do that, but this was an unusual thing. But he came up with the idea. He said, well, fluid dynamics, aerodynamics, and hydrodynamics are not that much different. He said they're different, but they're not that much different. So we can extrapolate, we can do tests in the wind tunnel of keels that are going in water, and we can tell things. So then he starts going to NACA sections, which are, like a government-produced book of sections, foil sections, and he started coming up with his own sections. I mean, this guy was really way ahead of his time. And he started coming up with keels and keel shapes that nobody had seen before. And at that time, they were kind of going through this hard phase of, displacement. They had rudders hung on the back of the keels. And so all of a sudden, they broke free of that. And they went, there's still production boats today that are very good boats that have the rudders hung on the back of the keel. But as for a race boat, it was like all of a sudden, the idea that took people to the next evolutionary step. All of a sudden, you didn't have to have a rudder hung on the back of the keel. You could have a fin keel and a spade rudder. And with a fin keel and a spade rudder, all of a sudden these foil sections became even more important. So that there was no fairing at all. Talk about fairing, you would just have the keel go right up because all of a sudden the bottom of the hull became the end plate. And the first races that we went to on Ron Holland boats it was really neat. We were winning to begin with, which was really cool. But we were doing things that people had no idea what we were even doing and how it worked. And we knew what those things were. We understood what we were doing. Other people didn't. We would get on a starting line. Somebody would get a start ahead of us. We would get a start ahead of them. And all of a sudden, we would go like this. And we would say, tack or you're out. If they didn't tack and we bumped them, they were out of the race. So we were doing things that were just, what it was we were getting lifted by the keel. The keel was actually taking us up to weather. We were pointing the same direction, but we were getting lifted by this keel that we were using. So
There's a slot effect going there.
whatever it was happening. It was a happening thing, and people were just totally amazed. They would look at us and they would go, whoa, who are these people? What are they doing? And we were winning races. That was the deal. But I sat at night with Sven Ritter after he worked all day at the Institute on his aeronautical engineering and teaching students, and he was, a professor. We would go at night and we would have kerosene smoke. You actually had a mist of kerosene that you would flow over the foil, and then you would have the wind speed. He'd be able to control the wind speed, and he'd take it over, and he would judge, whether it created turbulence or whether it had an even flow. What we used to talk about was laminar flow. Laminar flow, I can best explain that to you by taking a butter knife, or any knife, and hold it in the faucet as the water's coming out of the faucet. And if you turn it a little bit, all of a sudden you get all this turbulence. But if you have it just right, you create as little turbulence as possible. So those were the things that we were working with. That's the reason they tested keel designs. We were some of the first ones. Other people caught on. It took Charlie Morgan a while. But Charlie was a real pioneer.